Hello, Charlie Smith, Chong Benji, Georgia Strait. I'm Charlie Smith, editor of the Georgia Strait, and I'm very happy to be back for another week on WOW TV. I'm going to begin this week with a story that's taking place in the downtown east side of Vancouver in what used to be known as Japantown. And that's the 400 block of Powell Street. And it was actually quite a thriving area for the Japanese Canadian community until the Second World War. And then what happened at that time was the Japanese were interned and they were taken to camps after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And that was a very controversial issue in later years as Japanese Canadians sought redress. Well, also, the Chinese community had a presence in that area of town, and we would have old Chinese societies, and one of them was the Ming Sun Benevolent Society, which kind of represented the Wong family, and there were an awful lot of Wongs in Vancouver. Well, what's happened recently is this 122-year-old building has fallen into disrepair. On two sides of the building at 439 Powell Street, there are development properties. So the owner there, Tom Chow, would like to redevelop the block. And this is also an area that is, some people might think, is in need of redevelopment because it's not the most elegant area of Vancouver. However, the Ming Sun building was home to 8 Chinese seniors on the top floor, and it's also been home to an artist collective, the Instant Coffee Art Collective. Well, what's happened is the city knocked down one of the buildings on the neighboring property, and now the city is saying that there's problems with the Ming Sun building. But the Ming Sun people are saying that it's actually the city that caused the problem, something the city is denying. But nobody is denying that there's problems with the building on the exterior. So the cladding, so the city is saying that this is a danger. At first the city wanted to knock the building down and was ordering demolition. After a whole bunch of community activism by everyone from housing activists to many people of Chinese descent who's traced their roots back in Canada for several generations, and as well the arts community were rallying to save this building. And so it was given a reprieve. But on the day it was given a reprieve, that night there was a whole bunch of flooding in the building. So the city has boarded it up, prevented people from entering, but the Ming Sun spokesperson, David Wong, is saying that this flooding is very suspicious because he maintains that the taps were turned off and there was no water, and he had taken the media through there before, and this was clearly the case, that there was no running water, even though the Artist Collective was there. Fortunately, the Instant Coffee Art Collective had removed all of their materials from the building, so that wasn't damaged. But there's more damage to the building. It's going to increase the costs, and it's presenting some real challenges. Another story of interest to the Chinese Canadian community in Vancouver was the launch of a book at SFU Woodward's earlier this month, and it was called Spark, and it was about Milton Wong, who is one of the legendary Chinese Canadians in Vancouver. He was born in Vancouver, attended Strathcona Elementary in Chinatown, and then became a major financier. But Milton Wong didn't just make a lot of money, he gave a lot to the community. And one of the things he did was help build Science World. Another thing he did was he and his wife Faye contributed $3 million to SFU. Milton Wong was the chancellor of SFU, and that helped create the Faye and Milton Wong Experimental Theatre. And another thing Milton Wong did in the 1990s, when there was quite a backlash, it was actually the late 80s, early 90s, against Chinese investment in Vancouver, and this followed Li Ka-shing's purchase of the former Expo site, was Milton Wong created a multicultural think tank called the Laurier Institute. And now it's called the Laurier Institution, and it helps advance understanding of diversity issues. And that's another contribution that Milton Wong made. He created the Dragon Boat Festivals festival in False Creek, which has promoted more understanding. He was also quite an intellectual man, and this is not, people see him as a philanthropist and somebody who gave a lot to the community. He died a couple of years ago, actually, of cancer, and this book project, the book is called Spark. It includes 28 essays from prominent people in the community including David Suzuki, including former Premier Mike Harcourt, and David Mitchell, who's a former MLA and CEO of the Public Policy Forum in Ottawa. So they were all writing essays about Milton Wong, but what I liked most about the book were the speeches by Milton Wong himself. One of them referred to the downtown east side because he put a lot of effort into trying to revive this neighborhood, which was home to him when he was very young. And he pointed out the decline of the downtown east side, in his view, he traced it back to the internment of the Japanese Canadians. 22,000 people of Japanese descent, many Canadian-born, were rounded up, their assets were seized, but their community center was in Japantown and around Oppenheimer Park. And he said, when you took all of that energy out, all of that entrepreneurial energy out, you took these people away, you put them in camps in the BC interior, it sapped the vitality of the community, and that is why today he feels that's what triggered the long-term decline. And now there are efforts to bring it back to life. So you've got one situation, the Ming Sun building, under threat, being flooded, and that was the Wong family, society building. And then you've got Milton Wong, who gave so much to the community, who died a couple of years ago, and a book coming out honoring him called Spark, which also harkens back to that very area of town and what happened many years ago. Another one of Milton Wong's essays, which I found intriguing, was looking at the connection between climate change and pluralism. And he was pointing out that climate change is showing we're all in this together, that there are some serious issues that we have to face in the world. And he gave this speech in 2007. He was quite ahead of his time. And what he pointed out was climate change is going to actually lead to greater understanding between different cultures. And we saw that recently with Typhoon Haiyan, where the typhoon happened. And I was speaking with some people of Asian descent last night, including a Filipino Canadian, and he was commenting on how the typhoon has actually brought Canadians together from different backgrounds to try to help the people in the Philippines. So this was one of the things that Milton Wong was talking about in his book called Spark. So I recommend anyone who's interested to pick it up. Another story I'm going to talk about is problems in the left-wing civic party in Vancouver called COPE. One of their school trustees, Alan Wong, who was first elected in 1999, and he's was the only COPE politician elected in the 2011 election, and he has now crossed the floor and joined Vision Vancouver, the governing party. So the traditional left-wing party in Vancouver, which has had politicians sitting either on council, on park board, or on school board since 1999, and for many years in the 1970s and 80s and early 90s, now has nobody elected, and it's kind of sinking into a sea of recrimination. Another major figure in the party, Brent Granby, who ran for park board, has also joined Vision Vancouver. Others have quit the board. Part of the problem within COPE is that one of their senior members, Tim Lewis, who was a city councillor and a park board candidate, at one of the meetings, he brought in a group of people from called Mobilization Against War and Occupation, which are some left-wing activists who are not always popular within the left-wing community. And I think the fact that Tim Lewis has relied on them for some organizational support has actually boomeranged back and had a negative effect on some of the other people who have concerns about this group MAWO getting involved in COPE. And the final story I'm going to talk about is in Burns Lake, BC, and that involves the Enbridge pipeline, which is one of the major issues in British Columbia. Burns Lake is home to 6 First Nations bands. Enbridge wants to send its pipeline from the tar sands in Alberta to Kitimat, and it would cross Burns Lake, which is about halfway between across the province. And so the pipeline, some of the bands are opposed to the pipeline. the chief of one of the bands, the Burns Lake Band, Al Jarreau, has supported the pipeline and has signed a letter supporting Enbridge getting temporary permits. The curiosity here is that Albert Jarreau is married to Carol James, who's the former leader of the NDP. And Carol James headed the platform committee for the NDP, which opposed the Enbridge pipeline in the last provincial election. So here you've got the New Democratic Party and its former leader opposing the pipeline, Al Jarreau, chief of the Burns Lake Band, supporting Enbridge, and it's created a bit of a political problem for the NDP. I'm sure we'll hear more about this when the legislature reopens in the spring. But for now, I think I'm going to wrap things up. I'm Charlie Smith, editor of the Georgia Straight, here for WOW TV, and thanks for watching.